Let's save up the money again. My husband Ryan's words were the height of selfishness. The savings were meant for our daughter. Absolutely not for him to use as he pleased. So, I'm going to correct this misunderstanding. This will be my final gift and lesson to my soon-to-be ex-husband. I already got it transferred. $60,000 from your mistress. What? It's painful to involve my in-laws, but it's necessary to teach Ryan a lesson. They'll have to see this through to the end. My name is Brittany. I recently turned 40. I live with my husband Ryan and our daughter Christiana, who is about to enter high school. Though, lately, there's been a lot of uncertainty surrounding my husband. Ryan and I originally attended the same college. At first, we weren't particularly close. However, as we saw each other in lectures, joined the same clubs, and even ended up working at the same company, we started talking more. As we got to know each other, we grew closer. We both harbored a certain loneliness. Ryan grew up in a strict, traditional household, while I lost my parents early on. We weren't entirely alone. Ryan's parents were strict but not unloving, and I was raised by distant relatives. Still, there was a sense of unfulfillment. We tried to fill that void with our hobbies. Ryan was a car enthusiast, while I loved fantasy romance novels. We found common ground in our interests. As we talked more, we bonded and eventually started dating, leading to our engagement. However, it took some time for his parents to accept our engagement. His family was well off, so they were hesitant about someone like me becoming their daughter-in-law. Especially his father, Charles, who often gave me a disapproving look. I sympathize with your situation, but that's that. I still remember him saying that the first time we met. However, over time, our sincere feelings seemed to get through to them, and they eventually accepted our engagement. We did it! We can finally be married! Yes. I can still vividly recall the joy of that day. We got married and began a happy life together. Ryan dedicated himself to his job, and I, having retired, took on the role of a housewife. It would have been a happy ending if it had ended there. But life, much like the games I enjoy, has both happy and bad endings. Of course, reality can't be simplified into just luck or misfortune. But at least for me, it wasn't a happily ever after. And the reason was Ryan. A little after our marriage, he received a transfer order from his company, sending him to a different states. After discussing it, we decided to move together. The job promised better pay, which seemed good for our future with children. I don't think it will change anything. That was my thought. But in hindsight, I was wrong. Can we get a new car? It started just after we moved. Ryan had always loved the used car he bought during his single days. He had bought it without his family's help, determined to get it on his own, even though it wasn't a new car. It was no longer new and had been used on many of our dates. Though I wasn't knowledgeable about cars, I knew it was nearing its end. While it was sad to part with it, it was necessary. Since I nodded, Ryan happily rushed to buy the car. At that moment, my opinion was hardly taken into account. And by opinion, I mean only small suggestions like the color of the car. I didn't want to say anything unnecessary to Ryan, who was so excited to buy a new car for the first time. So I watched Ryan with a wry smile, but in hindsight, I might have felt a sense of discomfort here. Until then, Ryan had never ignored my opinions, always listening to what I had to say. Ryan bought a somewhat flashy-colored and designed compact car. Considering the previous used car had an old, subdued design to avoid his family's comments, it was a big change. Perhaps it was a reflection of his inner self. He had always struggled to distance himself from his hometown where his family lived. However, with the new job transfer that increased the distance, he was freed from his mental shackles. For him, buying the car might have been a final confirmation of this release. Whether consciously or unconsciously, I'm not sure. Anyway, he began to change gradually from there. It was the beginning of a slow descent into being more and more overbearing, something I didn't notice immediately. We used to discuss and decide various things as a couple, but gradually Ryan's decisions started to take precedence and were made without consulting me. We agreed to replace the microwave next, right? So why did you buy another car without telling me? Well, don't be so uptight. The dealer said now was a good time. Even when I asked him, slightly troubled, he brushed it off. However, he still had some sense of guilt back then. This visible sense of guilt disappeared after our daughter Christiana was born. I've heard that a husband's perspective and values can change after the birth of a child. But honestly, I couldn't believe how drastically Ryan changed. At first, I thought it was just the stress from his busy work schedule. But it wasn't just that. Even after things calmed down at work, he rarely showed any interest in me. Moreover, he started behaving in a domineering manner towards me. Why don't you help with the housework anymore? And you said you'd help take care of Christiana. When we were newly married, Ryan eagerly helped with housework. He laughed, saying that cooperation was the key to a happy marriage, and promised we would continue helping each other after the baby was born. But he dismissed all that as if it never mattered. I'm busy with work, you know. You handle the house stuff. Don't act all high and mighty when you don't even earn money. If you want to voice your opinion, try earning more than me. Being a housewife, those words made me feel quite small. So, at first, I tried my best to manage everything on my own, as Ryan said. With Christiana just born, I started working from home, and seeing me comply seemed to satisfy Ryan. That's the way it should be. That's how it's always been in my family. His family held on to old-fashioned values despite the changing times. His father, Charles, used to domineer over his mother, Gracie. His once hated such outdated family values. However, as he grew older, he began to justify his own overbearing nature by saying, that's how it was at home. Because his family, Charles, and Gracie were like that, he would be too. It's ironic. Being freed from what had always bound me, only to become something similar to what had been restricting me. But honestly, I question if his words are accurate. He seemed entirely unaware of these things and just started living according to his own desires. He was almost completely indifferent to Christiana. He had no idea what her favorite foods were or what interested her, and he didn't try to find out. Because of this, Christiana had given him cold looks from an early stage, but he didn't even notice. Instead, he was obsessed with cars, and whenever he learned about a sale of a car he liked, he would find some excuse to buy it. Shut up. It's my money, and I'll spend it however I want. When he made his third purchase, I finally told him it was too much, but he just said that and wouldn't listen. But if this continues, we'll have a hard time living. If it's tough, then figure it out yourself. Though you probably can't. He started to find my presence annoying, and gradually spent less time at home. Even so, things were still better a few years ago. Even though our life was in chaos, he didn't touch the account meant for Christiana's future. However, that was probably just a matter of time. Feeling the urgency, I continued working in my own way to supplement our household and savings. But that didn't solve the financial problems. As we were living, he crossed the final line. Can you explain what's going on? Oh, what about? You withdrew money from Christiana's account, didn't you? It was an account for Christiana's tuition, combined with the savings from when I worked at the same company as Ryan. I found out that the money in that account had decreased when I deposited a part of my earnings into it. Since Ryan had the passbook, I couldn't see the detailed statement. However, if the amount on the statement visibly decreases each time it's used, it's obvious. Using our precious money, even just a bit, was undeniably a painful betrayal. But he had crossed another line as well. What did you use it for? Another car? Not a car. Well, it's true that it's getting old, so I want to replace it soon. Ryan, laughing lightly, no longer had any of the sincerity from when we got married. Feeling sadness and confusion, he then said something even more shocking. A woman. You no longer have it. What's wrong with seeking attraction in another cute woman? Do you realize what you're saying? His words openly declared his infidelity. In my stunned state, he shamelessly continued. I'm telling you I'm cheating. Well, she's the main one now, so it's not really cheating. Seeing him smile as he spouted nonsensica. Excuses made me unbearably sad. But he didn't notice my sadness. On the contrary, he kept adding words that deepened my feelings. Just so you know, telling my parents won't help. They'll just laugh it off. How could you say that? Because they come from a time when cheating was a man's privilege. Does he really think such an old-fashioned notion justifies his infidelity now? He looked proud. And he probably genuinely believed it. Otherwise, he wouldn't brazenly admit his affair to me. Realizing this, my love for him clearly faded. This tendency had been there before, but this obviously foolish act was the final straw. You'd better be ready for it because I plan to divorce you soon. As I watched Ryan walk away with that condescending smile on his face, I felt a strong resolve building inside me. I couldn't stay with Ryan any longer. If this continued, it wouldn't just be my life that's ruined, but Christiana's too. I couldn't let that happen. With that thought, I began to take action secretly. At the same time, I decided to ask Christiana directly. Christiana, what do you think about Dad? These days, Christiana was trying to focus on her final push towards her high school entrance exams. I felt guilty about distracting her, but if things stayed as they were, the exams and her high school life would be the least of our worries. Feeling sorry for asking, Christiana answered normally. If you're asking if I hate him, yeah, I hate him. Dad's been cheating, right? You knew? Surprised, I saw Christiana continue without trying to hide her discontent. Yeah, I figured. Sometimes I could smell perfume that wasn't yours. I only found out recently, but that's impressive, Christiana. Mom, you've been busy with work lately, so it can't be helped. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep it from you, but it was hard to find the right time to talk about it. According to Christiana, she planned to tell me when the time was right if I hadn't noticed. But I always seemed so busy, and she couldn't find the right moment to bring it up. I'm sorry I made you worry. Don't worry about it. So, what are you going to do? Looking straight into my eyes, Christiana casually said. If you're going to divorce Dad, I'm all for it. Don't worry about the exams. It might even make me feel better and improve my focus. Seeing Christiana's smile, I felt relieved. Christiana, who I was most worried about regarding the divorce, seemed to have no problem with it at all. If that's the case, even if we wait a bit longer for the right time, the divorce itself isn't an issue. The problem would be who between Ryan and I would take control. Even Ryan would want to handle the divorce in a way that's advantageous to him. While I was thinking about that, time passed, and Christiana finished her high school exams and passed them successfully. When I informed Ryan, he surprisingly smiled happily about Christiana. In that case, we should let Dad and Mom know and celebrate. His words and expression seemed out of character for someone who had recently threatened me with divorce. Though I found it odd, there was nothing in his words to deny. So, I vaguely nodded, and a week later, we ended up having a small celebration party at his parents' house. It was more like a light meal gathering than a party. Ryan's parents were not as strict with Christiana as we were, and their relationship was more relaxed. Maybe because of that, even though Christiana was hesitant about Ryan's suggestion, she was looking forward to meeting her grandparents and the party. But I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Without any clear answers, the day arrived quickly. With mixed feelings, Christiana and I got into Ryan's car. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed in an unusually good mood. With that ambiguous atmosphere, we drove for about an hour and arrived at his parents' house. Glad you could make it. Today is a celebration. Eat as much as you want. Wow, this is amazing. In the spacious living room we were shown into, various dishes, starting with steak, were lined up. Among them were items like pizza that I doubt Ryan's parents particularly liked, probably for Christiana's sake. Just from that, I felt a glimpse into the strict thoughts of my in-laws. It was when I was about to thank them for their kindness. There's something I want to talk about before dinner, is that okay? Ryan said this while looking around at us. Make it short. We were a bit confused, but Charles answered calmly and gently. Gracie, standing beside Charles, nodded slightly. Confirming this, Ryan's smiling expression tightened a bit as he raised his voice. Since Christiana passed safely, I've been holding back, but I can't take it anymore, Brittany. I want a divorce. What? Ryan declared to my bewilderment. Listen, Dad, Mom. Brittany has been withdrawing money from Christiana's account and using it. The statement was sudden and baffling. Rather, it's Ryan who's been embezzling the money. While I was taken aback, Ryan presented the bank statement to my in-laws as evidence. Wait a minute. Ryan has always had the banking card. Panicking and lying won't help. The problem is that the money has been moved. It's terrible, isn't it? Almost draining the account meant for your daughter. I felt a bit like holding my head in my hands. So, this was the purpose of suggesting today's party. The statement only recorded the withdrawals, not who made them. Logically, if it's between the son and the daughter-in-law, the son would be trusted. Ryan's plan was to make me the villain, divorce, take alimony through the divorce court, and then remarry his mistress. While my in-laws stared grimly at the statement, Ryan moved close to me and whispered in my ear. I used the account money to buy a new car. He was confident my words wouldn't be believed no matter how much I claimed otherwise. Ryan continued speaking with a smug smile. You can save up the money again. His face showed complete confidence in his victory. But whether he could keep that face until the end was still unknown. By the way, there's something I want to ask you. What? When is the last date on that bank statement? Ryan briefly looked puzzled at my question. But he probably thought it was just a pathetic attempt to save face. A week ago? Oh, was there a paycheck or something? It must be small. You need to save up again, right, for the tuition? Ryan laughed at me again. But hearing that, I was sure of our victory. So, after nodding to Christiana, who was anxiously watching, I said loudly. Loud enough for everyone present to hear. I already received the money. $60,000 from your mistress. If you don't believe me, you can check right now. What? Charles, who had just finished checking the statement, seemed to lose his words at my unexpected remark. For a moment, his mouth was agape in shock. Gracie and Ryan were the same. But quickly regaining his composure, Charles asked me, Could you explain what you mean? Understood. She is Ryan's mistress. She's not here now, but we've already concluded our discussions. What? Ryan, who had seemed so confident a moment ago, now looked utterly shocked. What are you saying? No, what do you mean the conversation is already over? I mean exactly what I said. The discussion with Brianna Girton is finished. After making up my mind, I hired a private investigator to thoroughly investigate Ryan's surroundings. As a result, I have a pretty good understanding of the other woman's identity, position, and other details. I mean, it's ridiculous for him to think I wouldn't find out when he mentioned the other woman himself. Well, that shows just how much he underestimated me. Maybe he thought I wouldn't leave him because he was the main breadwinner. Either way, it was a thought born out of his contempt for me. Brianna Girton, 29 years old. She works as an office worker. She's a clerk at a company that deals with him. I started to share the information about Brianna Girton. Ryan, in his shock, could only move his mouth like a fish out of water. Not wanting to be interrupted, I pressed on with my story. Your mistress said she was attracted to you because of your generosity. Isn't that the same as saying she's after your money? Isn't it? Yeah, it is. Christiana laughed, and I joined in with a smile. Ryan must have realized it was a provocation because he began to tremble with anger. Ignoring his reaction, I continued speaking. And because you were so generous, she wanted to keep seeing him and take as much money as she could. She even talked about wanting to marry him for that reason. That's ridiculous. Ryan finally voiced his objection. That's not true. Brianna isn't like that. Oh? Then what kind of person is she? Brianna admired my personality and work ethic. She said she liked how serious I was. Serious? Yeah, right. I almost burst out laughing. What's so funny? A serious person wouldn't cheat. I nearly laughed out loud at such an obvious fact. Christiana seemed to feel the same way, covering her mouth and shaking with suppressed laughter. But the conversation wasn't over yet. With Charles watching, I managed to hold back the urge to laugh. Unfortunately, Brianna isn't the person you think she is. What are you basing that on? Ryan was almost shouting in his indignation. It seemed like he was really into her. But it would never work out. Because when I mentioned going to court and demanding compensation, she immediately cut you off. What? Ryan exclaimed in disbelief when I told him. But facts are facts. Brianna had indeed abandoned Ryan. She begged me not to go to court, saying she'd do anything, cooperate fully, just to avoid it. So I agreed to settle without going to court and get compensation from her. Brianna really wanted to avoid a court battle. I got her to agree to pay a higher than usual $60,000 and to fully cooperate in my favor during the divorce proceedings with Ryan. It's not true. It's true. She told me everything. How you met, the hotels you used, when and how often you saw each other. Ryan must have realized what my words meant. The color drained from his face. Glancing at him, I checked the notebook where I had written down the information from Brianna. It was clear that something was wrong with Ryan, so it was wise to be prepared. Charles, wasn't there about $2,000 withdrawn around November last year? I directed my question to Charles, who was holding the statement. Charles, watching the situation with a slightly stern face, calmly checked his computer. Eventually, he reached the relevant page and furrowed his brow deeper. Indeed, it seems to have been withdrawn. What was it used for? A designer handbag. The latest model this year or something. I'm not really familiar with these things, though. As I said this, I mentioned the time when Christiana's account started being used for Brianna's gifts. The amounts varied a bit, but they generally matched. Well, that's how it is. In other words, his claim that I misappropriated the account money is a lie. Shrugging as I said this, Ryan raised his voice in anger. What does that prove? Just because the amounts match doesn't mean anything. By that logic, your claim that Mom used the money is the same. Christiana pointed out, maintaining her composure unlike Ryan. Showing only the withdrawn amounts and saying you spent it isn't usually enough, is it? Dad, it seems like you were trying to cover up with bluster. Christiana's words were valid. If you think about it calmly, they couldn't pin the blame on me with just the statement. If reported to the police and investigated thoroughly, overturning it should be easy. If they checked the bank withdrawals, that should be enough. However, he had completely underestimated me. He was convinced that I wouldn't and couldn't go that far. He thought he had an overwhelming advantage, and I would just quietly comply. But, by using money intended for Christiana, my stance had changed. I wasn't going to hesitate to take action for my precious daughter. If that alone isn't enough proof, there are other pieces of evidence. As I said this, I took out some of the evidence I had brought from my bag. I don't really want to show you this, but it's proof of Ryan's affair with Brianna. The photos gathered by the detective showed them on dates, entering and leaving hotels, kissing. All sufficient evidence of the affair. As I was about to hand the stack of photos to Charles. What does this mean? Ryan shouted, snatching the evidence from my hand. In the next moment, he began tearing them apart. I think it's questionable to try and destroy evidence while saying what does it mean. After a small sigh, I turned to Ryan. He was so agitated that he was breathing heavily. Shut up! Besides, there are plenty more pieces of evidence. Shut up, I said! Who cares about the affair? Interrupting me, Ryan's words were anachronistic and out of touch with modern values. A woman should just support her husband without saying anything. Ugh, you're the worst. Christiana muttered quietly, but with deep disgust. Even his own child's words didn't seem to reach him. His face twisted with anger as he raised his voice even more. You wouldn't have even noticed the affair if I hadn't mentioned it. I'm the one putting food on the table for you all. Right, Dad? And those words were directed at Ryan's father. Dad, I finally understand your feelings. It's only natural to be strict with Mom. If you don't discipline her properly, she won't understand my greatness. Ryan had a creepy smile on his face. It was unclear if he was aware of it. Honestly, I wanted to show him a mirror. But Ryan continued speaking as if he were on top of the world. Dad would understand. Making a fuss over just an affair. Affairs are a man's privilege. However, his tone didn't last long. A sharp sound echoed. It was none other than Charles who slapped Ryan across the cheek. Dad, what? Ryan, in pain, rubbed his cheek and looked at Charles again. Then he finally realized. Charles had a furious expression on his face. What do you understand? Is that how you've seen me? You idiot. But Dad, I always thought you were like that. Enough with your nonsense. At Charles's angry voice, he screamed again. Gracie watched the two of them with sad eyes. Sure, my words and expressions towards Mom and you might have been harsh. Then, but I never once intended to make her or you sad. Ryan seemed genuinely frightened by his stern gaze. Even from this scene alone, it was clear. Charles had never truly directed his anger at Ryan or Gracie before. So, Ryan was confused and scared by this first-time experience. Gracie, on the other hand, just looked sad. Before getting married, I heard stories about Ryan's parents and vaguely imagined them as unreasonable and nitpicking. But after meeting them several times, I realized I was wrong. Their words and gazes were harsh, but they made sense. If they just wanted to impose unreasonable things, their attitude wouldn't soften. Their concern about the family background of Ryan's partner was also out of worry for him. You could call it old-fashioned, but it's true that it's reassuring to have someone with a clear background. If they were truly overly strict, I don't think their relationship would have lasted this long. Of course, there are people in the world who impose relationships where you have no choice but to obey. But the looks Ryan's parents exchanged sometimes never felt like that. So he probably only saw things from his convenient perspective. A reason to rebel against a strict family, a reason to get close to me, he probably portrayed his parents' relationship and education worse than they were. This wasn't just limited to his parents, but also towards me, Christiana, and Brianna as well. He only saw things in a way that suited him. That was Ryan's true nature. His parents probably understood that. That's why they raised him strictly. But after being away from his parents, there was nothing to stop him.
And affairs are a man's privilege? Nonsense! Someone who cheats can't be right.
That's just a straightforward, undeniable fact. It should be easy to understand, regardless of a strict family. He ignored that obvious truth with convenient excuses. Faced with the undeniable truth, he let out a foolish groan. I am deeply sorry for what my son has done. It is truly unforgivable. Charles, after apologizing to me deeply, stated firmly. Being with someone like him is just a waste of your time. Please separate and live a new life. We will make sure you receive alimony, and you will get a favorable division of property.
What?
Charles, are you sure about this? I'm sure as parents, they would have wanted to side with Ryan. Of course, that would be problematic, but it's understandable as a parent's instinct. To my question, Charles nodded deeply. Seeing this, Gracie, who had remained silent until now, began to speak.
Brittany, you are truly a kind person. You don't have to forgive such a fool who deceived someone as kind as you. He has completely crossed our limit earlier.
Gracie, thank you.
You don't need to thank us. Rather, we are the ones who should apologize. It is disgraceful to have raised such a foolish child,
Gracie said, her eyes slightly moist. His actions had exceeded the limits of parental tolerance. It is his responsibility for his selfish behavior, but my heart aches for his parents. Christiana also looked sadly at her grandparents. Despite that,
don't be ridiculous. This can't be allowed.
Only Ryan, who couldn't grasp the reality, kept making a fuss. Even Charles was looking at him with a fed-up expression, and Christiana was looking at him as if he were trash.
The one who is not forgiven is you, Ryan. And even if we do nothing, the outcome won't change.
There is a mountain of evidence of the affair, and the mistress would testify to reduce alimony. Even if we go to court, there is no element for him to win. With the cooperation of his parents, it would be even more so. Whether he didn't understand this, or if he had some trick up his sleeve, he was smiling with a twisted face.
Yeah, the outcome won't change. Because, you see, Brittany, you can't live on your income alone. You have to rely on me.
No, didn't I say that Brianna transferred the money earlier?
That's a lie. It can't be. Even if that's true, Christiana's high school and college tuition will eat it up.
What Ryan said, shaking his head like a child throwing a tantrum, was just wishful thinking for him. To correct him, I said, "Sorry, but that's just your wishful thinking, Ryan. I can live with Christiana just fine now." I took out my personal bank statement from my bag and opened it to show him. Seeing it, Ryan let out a foolish voice.
"What? How did you earn that much while staying at home?"
The statement showed nearly $100,000 in savings. Looking at the stunned Ryan, I said as if it was nothing, "There are quite a few jobs you can do from home. In my case, I'm a writer."
"A writer?"
"Dad, of course, you wouldn't know since you never cared, but Mom was working a lot." While staying at home, I had been taking various writing assignments online in my spare time. "Ryan, you always said, don't interfere with the money I earned, handle it yourself." So, I tried my best. Though at first, I was at a loss as to what to do. So, I decided to start with something I liked, and I arrived at writing, especially storytelling. Of course, it didn't go smoothly from the start. I started my writing career back when there wasn't a proper system for receiving orders online like there is now. Even after repeatedly submitting to magazines, I saw no results and faced many failures. There were many days when I couldn't find any orders, and even when I did, they weren't accepted. However, by steadily continuing my efforts day by day, I began to receive recognition and good reputation spread. Now, Mom even takes on game scenario requests. Famous works that even I know about. Recently, I had even started getting big requests like that. Even so, I have to admit that my income is still unstable. But I feel confident in my current work, so I think a little more time is all I need. And I can cover that with the savings I've accumulated so far. By the way, what I've been depositing into our joint account is only a part of my total income. As his true nature became apparent, I felt it was risky to deposit the full amount, hence my decision. In fact, since Ryan was using it recklessly, I can say that decision was correct. That's why we don't need your help anymore. We'll gladly take the compensation and child support from the divorce trial, though."
"Lies! Lies! That can't be true! Does that mean I have no place anymore?"
Ryan, apparently shocked, muttered in a daze. But suddenly, he lifted his head and shouted with bloodshot eyes.
"That's right! It's a lie! Brianna won't abandon me. It must all be your lies. I am needed."
After glaring at all of us, he stormed out of the room. He ran away like a rabbit, as the expression goes. Will he be okay? Christiana's okay was more about whether he would cause trouble for anyone rather than his safety. But chasing after him now wouldn't likely catch him. So, we had no choice but to leave him be for a while. "If it comes to it, I'll bring him back, so don't worry." Charles's words, thoughtfully considering our intentions, gave us relief. So our current concern is. However, it's troublesome. I didn't expect this to happen, so I might have ordered too much. Yes, it was about what to do with the large amount of food left here. Christiana and I exchanged glances and, smiling wryly, thanked our parents-in-law together. Then an unexpected turn of events occurred. First, Brianna, who had been Ryan's affair partner, was arrested by the police. I had been wondering. She had easily transferred a large amount of alimony. I thought her family must be quite wealthy, but if that were the case, she wouldn't have cozied up to him in the first place. The trick was, she was actually a kind of con artist. Just like with Ryan, she cozied up to many men and extracted money from them, accumulating a considerable amount. One of the men noticed this and reported her to the police, leading to her arrest. So, what happened to Ryan, who sought refuge with Brianna? With her arrest, that became impossible, and he was found in a daze by Charles, who restrained him. However, driven into a corner, he turned to us. I was wrong. So, let's start over again. Of course, I had no intention of accepting such a convenient story. So, I told Charles that he had called both Christiana and me. Then, Charles got furious once again. In a situation with no escape, he thoroughly lashed out at Ryan like never before. As a result, Ryan agreed to our divorce. He promised to pay alimony and child support through the divorce proceedings and accepted the property division in a way that wasn't unfavorable to us. Currently, he is staying with his in-laws, who decided to straighten him out. It means he has to wake up very early since his in-laws' house is far from the office. Moreover, the news of our divorce had already spread in the company. Probably because I used to work there. A colleague who noticed something was off with he contacted me, knowing I was once his coworker and now his ex-wife, to ask about the situation. Naturally, they didn't want to be caught up in his mistakes. I had no reason to hide anything, so I told them everything. The information I provided quickly circulated throughout the company. Ryan, knowing that everyone was aware of the situation, found himself surrounded by cold stares, feeling like he was on a bed of nails. The daily stress has caused him to become very gaunt. As for us, without the source of stress that Ryan represented, we were living comfortably. Christiana had recently started high school. I was worried that our divorce might have a lasting impact on her. "No way," she said cheerfully with a bright smile. "As long as it doesn't affect her, that's all that matters." At that time, a game scenario I had written received exceptionally high praise, leading to an influx of requests. I can't accept all the requests, so I am carefully reviewing each one. This must be what they call a happy dilemma. If this experience can be of any reference in the future, that would be great, but the story is a bit outrageous, so it seems difficult. Still, if the opportunity arises someday, it might not be a bad idea to compile the story somehow. Although it's an unpleasant memory, it's undeniable that the event is part of our history. To prevent others from interpreting it in their own convenient way like Ryan did, there is value in writing it down. So that I won't struggle when the time comes, I will start jotting down bits and pieces of that time. I thought it would be nice if one day I could read it together with my daughter and laugh about it. Hey, housekeeper. I've invited my celebrity friends over, so make them feel welcome. I was told this by my son's wife Linda, and I wondered how to respond. With guests already here, arguing wasn't an option. Thinking this, I remained calm, which seemed to surprise Linda. She probably expected me to retort in some way. Ignoring that, I carried the finished meal to the living room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Rebecca, the housekeeper." I said this with a smile as I entered, but I was shocked to see the faces of the surrounding celebrities. And it wasn't just me who was surprised. The celebrities who saw me started murmuring among themselves. Then, one of them confronted Linda.
"How come she is the one doing this? I can't believe she's a housekeeper. Linda, what's the meaning of this?"
3 minutes later, my son, Anthony's return would cost Linda everything. "My name is Rebecca. Last spring, as I turned 65, I retired and am now not working. Having lost my husband early, I raised my eldest son, Anthony, on my own. Anthony, who is now 39, got married 6 months ago. Since then, I've been living comfortably alone in a condominium. Freed from work and family obligations, I thought it was time to enjoy my own life. But reality was not so kind. The problem was my daughter-in-law. Linda, Anthony's wife, is 27, comes from a decently good family. Anthony, who has always been shy, had never dated a woman before. He met Linda at a singles mixer. He was invited to buy a friend. I'm not well versed in current marriage customs, but Anthony, who had become an associate professor in his late 30s, attended a party limited to men with an annual income of over $80,000. Therefore, many women there were proactive in approaching men, even those significantly older than themselves. For the shy Anthony, being approached by younger women must have been flattering. But as a mother, I had my reservations about this unnatural way of meeting. Yet, seeing Anthony introduce Linda with a happy face, I couldn't bring myself to show displeasure. With that, I decided to warmly accept Anthony's marriage. However, Linda, raised as a young lady, turned out to be incapable of doing anything. Because of her, I would be severely inconvenienced later on. My headaches over Linda began just before the wedding. It was on the day of a dinner with both families when I found myself alone with her in the restroom. I smiled when our eyes met. However, she had a mean smirk on her face. "How did you find my parents?" she said. "Very nice parents," I replied calmly. "It is not like that." But Linda retorted with a look that said she meant something else. "My parents run a company, so we're of a different class. They're paying for the house we'll live in the most upscale neighborhood around here, you see," she boasted proudly. I knew from Anthony that her parents were building them a new house. Still, I wasn't pleased with her condescending look. I couldn't help but respond in kind. "It seems so. I'll also contribute financially as much as I can." She snorted and smirked again. "You don't have to strain yourself. You're not working, so you couldn't possibly afford it, right?" Linda had a way of being offensive with her words. I wanted to reply, but she left the restroom and went to Anthony, who was waiting outside, with a flattering voice. Seeing Anthony smile happily, I realized I couldn't disturb his happiness, having found it so late in life. So, I chose to stay silent, thinking Linda probably just disliked me, potentially her future mother-in-law. If you are truly in love, Anthony, things will work out. That's what I believed, so I decided not to interfere with their marriage and to keep my distance from the newlyweds. However, as soon as their married life began, the troubles started. Linda, who was clueless about everything, would call my mobile phone first thing in the morning, not knowing how to use the washing machine. Despite explaining over the phone, she couldn't grasp it, so I had no choice but to rush over to her place. "Rebecca, you came. Can you please do the laundry right away?" Although I only came to explain how to use the washing machine, Linda dumped all the laundry on me, and then even demanded I clean. Linda didn't know how to use not only the washing machine but also the vacuum cleaner. Even as I tried to show her how, she just watched TV, ignoring me. When I tried to scold her, she sensed it and fled to the restroom, staying there for 30 minutes, leaving me to do the cleaning. Since then, Linda would call me over during weekdays when Anthony was not home, dumping all household chores on me without a word of thanks. In fact, she would say terrible things. "Rebecca, you're always so free, you might as well do this. It's not like you've given us any money for the house like my parents." She would say this and then leave to enjoy her social life with the ladies in the neighborhood. Moreover, she bragged to everyone that our house had a housekeeper, so she didn't have to do any housework. I was furious at her attitude. "Linda, don't you think that's a bit too much? I'm here out of kindness, understanding you're struggling with unfamiliar chores." Even as I said this, her attitude remained unchanged, lounging on the living room sofa, acting high and mighty. "What? Acting all important just because you're a housekeeper? If you dare tell Anthony about this, I won't let you off easily. I'll tell Anthony you've been harassing me." How twisted could she be? I regretted not opposing their marriage from the start. She would summon me and then, before Anthony returned in the evening, send me away. This routine continued daily, and I was fed up. Then one day, as usual, I received an early morning call from Linda. But today, she seemed panicked. "What's wrong? You seem in a hurry." When I asked, she replied in a troubled voice, "Today, I'm hosting my birthday party at our place. I was actually calling for my mom to help, but she just told me she can't make it. Come quickly." Apparently, she had planned to have her mother prepare for her birthday party. But now that she couldn't come, Linda wanted me to take over instead. Well, expecting to be called for chores anyway, I was prepared.
"So, I'm your mom's substitute? Got it. I'll be there shortly."
Oh, wait. I haven't prepared anything for the meal. Make sure to buy some ingredients on your way, will you?
Yes.
Knowing Linda, the kitchen would have nothing. I bought ingredients from an early opening supermarket before heading over to help her. Linda scrutinized each item I bought, checking prices and ingredients. "It's a party. I wished you had bought something nicer." Well, no choice now. Hurry up with the preparations. As usual, without thanking me for the groceries, she treated me like a housekeeper. Resigned to my fate, I began the preparations without complaining. While she didn't lift a finger to help, focusing instead on her makeup. After a while, her friends arrived at our house. Since I was still preparing the meal in the back, Linda greeted them at the door by herself.
"Everyone, welcome to my birthday party. I've prepared lots of delicacies, so please enjoy yourselves."
Despite her attitude towards me, Linda entertained her friends with an air of celebrity, completely different from how she treated me. Listening from the back, I could hear her voice clearly, speaking in a key 2 octaves higher than usual, almost making me laugh. As I prepared the meal, I listened to their voices. Then, I overheard a conversation that sent chills down my spine. "Is the housekeeper cooking again today?"
"Yes. She'll do anything if you ask. But don't expect much in terms of taste. She's a terrible housekeeper."
Hearing Linda's words, her friends all laughed. I knew she was telling her friends I was the housekeeper, but to call me a terrible one was too much. Despite doing all the chores without complaint, this was unfair treatment. Linda, getting carried away, continued to badmouth me.
"Really, our housekeeper is so sloppy with cleaning, and she doesn't even make the laundry fluffy. She's the worst."
Then why not get a new housekeeper? I can introduce you to a good one. No, thank you. Our household isn't as wealthy as yours. We can barely afford our current bottom-of-the-barrel housekeeper. Listening to this ridiculous exchange was truly absurd. Yet, hearing her speak ill of me so casually made me want to confront her. As Linda finished talking with her friends, she entered the kitchen and addressed me in the most arrogant tone imaginable.
"Hey, housekeeper. I've invited my celebrity friends over, so entertain them."
I thought about how to respond to her. With guests already here, arguing wasn't an option. Despite my anger reaching its peak, I replied with a smile. "I understand. You're lucky to have such refined friends." Linda, perhaps taken aback by my response, stood with her mouth open. She probably expected me to retaliate in some way. Ignoring that, I carried the prepared meal to the living room.
"Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am Rebecca, the housekeeper."
I said this with a smile as I entered, but I was surprised by the celebrities' reactions. And it wasn't just me who was surprised. The celebrities who saw me also started murmuring among themselves. Then, one of them confronted her.
"Why is she the one doing this? I can't believe she's a housekeeper." Linda, what's going on?
When one of celebrity questioned her, the others looked at her with skepticism. Linda stood frozen, looking as if she had been deceived.
Huh? What? What's everyone's problem?
The celebs ignored Linda's question and turned their attention to me. It's been a long time, Professor Rebecca.
Everyone, it's been a while. I never imagined we'd meet like this. Despite having such a terrible daughter-in-law, I suppose I should be thankful.
I said this to them, making it clear I was addressing Linda. Realizing I was Linda's mother-in-law, everyone glared at her. Linda, caught lying, looked uncomfortable.
Linda, isn't it disrespectful to call such a wonderful mother-in-law a housekeeper? She was our professor during college. Yes. Since retiring, she has been awarded the title of Professor Emeritus, a well-respected individual in this area. Linda, weren't you aware?
Hearing this from everyone, Linda was stunned and speechless. Understandably so. Until now, she thought I was just an unemployed old woman. In this high-end residential area, education has always been a priority, with numerous prestigious tutoring schools. Even daughters from good families attending state universities wasn't uncommon. Many of the young celebrity wives here today are graduates of the state university where I taught. Unlike them, Linda graduated from a private university in the city, unaware of my reputation. I apologized to my former students for the discomfort caused. Sorry, everyone. My son's wife started living in this neighborhood without knowing anything. When I said that, Linda glared at me with an expression that said,
"Don't be stupid."
About 3 minutes later, Anthony came home. Well, to be precise, he had been home for about 10 minutes but had quietly gone to his room. Linda, who normally wouldn't expect Anthony to be home at this time, was panicking. "Anthony? Why are you home so early?" Facing a jittery Linda, Anthony calmly answered, "Ah, it's your birthday today, the first one since we got married. I came home early, but I didn't feel it was the right moment to come out, so I waited in the room for about 10 minutes. If you were coming home early, you should have told me in advance," Linda said, sweating nervously. Probably, Anthony intended to surprise her by coming home early. Given what was overheard, it's understandable why he didn't come out. Tentatively peering at Anthony, Linda asked, Did you hear the voices?"
I heard everything. Even from outside, it was clear you were calling my mother a housekeeper.
Linda's face went pale upon hearing Anthony's words. Then, turning to me with a voice on the verge of tears, she asked, "Rebecca, did you know he was home? Why didn't you tell me?" Linda looked at me with pleading eyes, perhaps hoping for some way to deflect the situation. However, no matter how much she pleaded, I had no intention of helping. "Well, I did think I heard some noise at the entrance while I was preparing the meal. But I was too busy to notice." I said so, but the truth was, I clearly knew he had come home. He had entered just as Linda was bad-mouthing me. So, I looked at Anthony and silently gestured for him to be quiet by placing a finger on my lips. That's why he quietly went into the bedroom without Linda noticing. I wondered how he felt, listening to all of Linda's insults about me alone in the room. As I feared, he seemed shocked. With a sad expression, Anthony then said to Linda, "Linda, I knew my mother was coming over to do chores almost every day. I could tell by the way things were cleaned, the way the laundry was folded, and the taste of the food." Linda, hearing this, awkwardly looked down. It seemed she was too embarrassed to make excuses now. He continued,
"I'm not upset that you asked her to help with chores. I thought you were getting along with her. But to exploit her, calling her a housekeeper and then bad-mouthing her? I never thought you were that kind of person.
Linda seemed to reflect on his words. However, suddenly, she lifted her head and turned towards her friends. Then, an unbelievable answer came back from Linda's mouth.
Rebecca didn't contribute financially to our house like my parents did. I thought it was because she was poor, so I told her not to bother. How sneaky to hide that she was a university professor.
Linda, even now, tried to paint me as the villain. Feeling the need to correct her, I raised my voice.
No, I wasn't hiding anything.
That's right. When I introduced you to her, she had already retired. We didn't think it necessary to mention her past job. Saying she was a university professor might sound like bragging, right? We explained. Yet, Linda was not satisfied and refused to back down.
I don't want to hear such excuses. It's as if I was made a fool of for not knowing. If I had known, I wouldn't have called her a housekeeper.
Linda insisted she was embarrassed because she had been unaware. She had predetermined I was poor and had exploited me accordingly. It seemed she hadn't reflected on what Anthony had said earlier. Finally, Anthony lost his patience and raised his voice.
Linda, what does it matter if my mother wasn't a professor? Judging people by your own standards like that, you're no longer my wife. We're getting a divorce. Please leave.
At the word divorce, Linda flinched momentarily but then retorted with a defiant attitude.
Fine, I understand. But since my parents built this house, Anthony, you should be the one to leave.
Linda declared this, then closed the front door behind her and left. Presumably, she went back to her parents' house to complain.
Wait a second, the money for this house was…
Anthony tried to call out to the departing Linda, but it was too late.
It's okay, Anthony. She'll understand soon enough.
I reassured him, and Anthony calmed down, saying,
Well, yeah.
After all, the divorce seemed inevitable, so Linda would lose everything. It wouldn't take long for her to realize that. What concerned me more at that moment were my former students who had come to visit. The sudden turn of events had caused a stir. I'm so sorry, everyone. I didn't mean for this to happen today of all days.
No, please don't worry about us. But really, she's terrible, isn't she?
Yes, indeed. It's absolutely right that you're getting a divorce. What was supposed to be Linda's birthday party had turned into a celebration of reuniting with my celebrity former students. I took the opportunity to ask them how Linda usually spent her time with these affluent friends. As it turned out, she was indeed an outsider in their circle. Unable to keep up with the celebrities, she nevertheless tried hard to fit in, clinging to anyone she could. Everyone expressed their displeasure at how I, their former teacher, had been mistreated by Linda. They wanted to do more than just let the divorce happen. They wanted to make her panic and regret her actions. Everyone, I appreciate your feelings, but there's no need for that now. Linda will soon face enough consequences for her actions. She'll understand that before long. I said to everyone and enjoyed the evening chatting with my former students over the meal I had prepared. Just when we were about to call it a day, Linda returned, crying. She must have been shocked after learning the truth. Why did it have to happen like this? Oh? So you went back to your parents' house, didn't you? I addressed her, and Linda glared at me sharply.
You brat knew and kept quiet about it, didn't you? Hey! What do you mean brat when speaking to her? Because she never tells me anything. She's just a coward.
She yelled, then burst into tears. Linda's father had recently declared bankruptcy, struggling to pay his employees and taking on debt. When her parents came to me, They were distressed because they had promised to finance their daughter's marital home, but now had to allocate those funds to pay off debts. When I went back home, my parents were preparing to move. They had to sell the house because of the debts. You knew about this and didn't tell me. Linda sobbed as she said this. I replied in a gentle tone to calm her down. Your parents didn't want you to worry about them, which is why they asked me to keep quiet. And as for the payments for this house, you ended up covering them, didn't you? So, doesn't that mean I'm the one who should leave? Realizing she was at a disadvantage, Linda looked down, avoiding my gaze. Anthony placed a hand on Linda's shoulder and said, Linda, it's time to apologize for everything you've said to her. Even if we can't continue together, we'll make sure you're taken care of after the divorce. Although Anthony spoke these words, Linda sulked and replied, Why should I be the one to apologize? I've been deceived by her all this time, unaware of my parents' plight, and now I've lost my family home. I'm the one who deserves an apology. The room became noisy at her outburst. I had been treating Linda with kindness out of pity, but my patience had run out. Don't you understand? Your parents didn't want to burden you, so when they asked me to help with the house payments, they pleaded, please take care of Linda. Yet, you've been completely unaware of their concerns, only focusing on your own feelings. When I conveyed the feelings of her parents to Linda, she had nothing to retort. Following that, Anthony also spoke. Well, regardless, I've decided to divorce Linda. I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow, so please sign them. For now, pack your belongings tonight and leave by tomorrow. What? You can't just tell me to leave suddenly like that. It's impossible. Linda blurted out as if in a panic. It was because even considering moving in with her parents at their new place, the apartment was only big enough for a couple to live in. Linda, with a troubled look, glanced around. She seemed to be thinking of getting help from her wealthy friends, but not a single one paid her any attention. Sorry, but Linda is no longer one of us. That's right. You're not rich or anything anymore, just another person struggling. As they said this, the celebs took turns berating Linda. They were thinking of me and had just talked about wanting to surprise and fluster her. They wanted to make Linda startle and panic. I guess that's what they're doing. She was biting her lip, her head bowed in silence. It seemed she had come to realize that she had lost not just her family, but also the friends she trusted. Then, the next morning, Anthony went to get the divorce papers and signed them. Linda seemed hesitant, unable to sign for a while. She was probably worried about being kicked out without anywhere to go. Holding the pen, her hand trembling, she finally burst into tears. Sorry, I won't boss Rebecca around anymore. I won't ever call you a housekeeper again. Please forgive me. Looking closely at Linda's crying face, there wasn't a single tear. She must have suddenly become afraid of leaving and started fake crying. Anthony and I, showing an expression that we were not falling for it, blamed her. It's pointless to say such things now. Who would fall for that kind of crying? That's right. Instead of wasting time crying, you should seriously think about what to do next. Perhaps thinking she had no other options, she resignedly signed the divorce papers. And then, carrying her packed belongings, she left the house. Suddenly, I noticed Anthony had tears in his eyes. For him, it had been happiness he had finally found. Yet, he decided to divorce for my sake, which pained my heart. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. Are you sure this was the right thing to do? When I asked, Anthony, who had been drooping his shoulders, turned around and showed a smile. I'm too old to be this pathetic, huh? Fell for a young woman after her money really shows I had no eye for people. His smile seemed so lonely. What should I say to him at a time like this? He had always been a dutiful son. Maybe that's why he made such a sacrifice this time. Anthony, thank you so much. You're not pathetic at all. You're kind and live for others, even at your own expense. Surely, a good person will come along someday. That's right. If you believe, a good connection is bound to come. When I shared my thoughts, Anthony also smiled and said, "Yeah, you're right." And Linda, after all, had moved into her parents' cramped apartment. Her parents, despite my being her mother-in-law, had asked me to take care of Linda but lamented that she was driven out due to her selfishness. Linda's parents had truly trusted me. So thinking it wasn't right, they brought her to my place. But without inviting her in, I told them at the entrance. What happens in a marriage is the couple's issue. Anthony is trying his best to move forward positively. So, it's best for the parents not to interfere in their divorce. To my opinion, the parents nodded in agreement, saying, "Yes, yes." Linda showed an attitude towards her parents. That's what I said, right? It was pointless to come. That day, having convinced them, I sent them back home at once. However, afterwards, Linda constantly argued with her parents. The parents kept saying it was her fault the marriage failed, even though she had married a good person. But she still insisted that the bad one was me, the lying mother-in-law. Since then, the relationship between Linda and her parents remained tense. Years later, unable to bear it anymore, Linda ran away from home and came to Anthony. She begged for reconciliation, but there was no way Anthony would consider it now. Watching his cold behavior, she lashed out at him. "What about you anyway? I just wanted to be a housewife with a high-earning husband." But Anthony, being just an associate professor with an $80,000 salary, is such a mediocre amount. All my friends' husbands earn over $100,000, so I really felt inferior back then. What? What are you trying to say? That's why you'll never be able to remarry in your life. Originally not popular with women, and with such an average income, even gold diggers won't come near you. At her words, he burst into laughter. Not just Anthony, but I, listening in the back, and another family member laughed out loud. Who did you say can't remarry? Hear that unfamiliar female laughter from the back? That's my wife. Huh? Yes, currently living in this house is Anthony's newly remarried wife. I happened to be visiting, so I listened to the conversation between Anthony and Linda along with them. By the way, Anthony has become a professor at his university in an exceptionally quick rise. Linda showed a surprised look when Anthony told her this. So that means high income, right? And I thought you would still be single because you don't seem to have any luck with women. Me? So, you went to several other men? And since no one was interested, you thought I'd still be available? It seemed Anthony hit the nail on the head. With a look of disappointment, Linda silently left the scene. I'm still in touch with her parents, so I know that Linda has been into singles mixers again since the divorce. However, it seems no man is interested in her, who is not so young anymore. She must have thought Anthony was still single and hoped for a reconciliation. But with her as she is now, I think she'll have to live alone from here on. Even her parents say they've given up on her. Afterwards, according to the parents, Linda moved into the house of an elderly man living alone. Apparently, it was for his money, but soon after moving in, he required care. The elderly man, not wanting to enter a facility, asked her to take care of him. With nowhere else to go, Linda has resigned herself and is now struggling with the unfamiliar task of caregiving. And our house is enjoying happy days since Anthony remarried. Anthony says he learned a lot from his failed marriage. Having broadened his perspective and increased his interactions with people, Anthony became close with a woman of his age who works as a lecturer at the same workplace. She also had a history of divorce, and they hit it off. After a year of dating, he remarried. The new wife, a very nice person, said to me,
"Let's live together."
However, as much as she offered, I kindly declined. Actually, I received a call from the university I worked at, asking me to come back. Returning to work means living with my son and his wife would be inconvenient in many ways. So, I've decided to continue living freely on my own. At the university, I've interacted with many students. They study various fields and then go out into society. I love being part of such educational environments. Among the affluent students I've met again, some now have children. They've requested this of me. It's great you've returned as a professor. We hope our children can also be under your care, so please stay healthy and continue teaching until then. Waiting until those children turn 18 will take another 14 to 15 years. Yet, I've sworn to fulfill that promise. As long as my body allows, I want to keep watching over as many students as possible. That's my greatest joy as a university professor. My mind was already swelling with the idea of living with my son, Thomas.
There should be no problem using the spare room as a bedroom for Thomas and his wife, Jessica.
Just then, I received a call from my daughter, Dorothy, on my mobile phone. Thomas called me.
He's already contacted you too.
That means he must have called you as well, Mom.
Yes, he did, about 10 minutes ago. Thomas, who hasn't reached out in 18 years, said he's okay with living with me. It seems Thomas has grown up without me realizing.
Then, on the other end of the phone, Dorothy sighed. Thomas has no intention of taking care of you, Mom. Before calling you, Mom, he called me. Guess what he said? He asked if he could live with me.
Thomas told me he wanted to live with me. Jessica agreed as well.
That's definitely a lie. He only turned to you because I refused. Our dream of living together was falling apart. The dream of living together, which had been growing inside me, was crumbling apart. I just got a call from Thomas saying he's going to live with you, and he sounded so excited. He plans to live there without working. And I overheard Jessica laughing in the background, saying they've got themselves a good housekeeper now. There's no way people like that will take care of you, Mom. My inflated expectations turned to hatred.
What a predicament. I wonder if there's any way to get Thomas and Jessica to leave.
I decided to seek advice from Dorothy. My name is Mary. I'm just an ordinary housewife you'd find anywhere. I lost my husband, Matthew, last year after living together for many years. Currently, I live alone in the suburbs of the city. Our children have moved out, and we had planned to enjoy a leisurely life together after retirement, but Matthew passed away suddenly. The rooms felt spacious for one, contrary to their actual size. And I felt the loneliness of suddenly having no one to talk to. Going shopping for distractions, I'd meet familiar store clerks and friends to chat with. But even taking a short walk around the neighborhood was a struggle for me. After fracturing my leg in a fall indoors in my mid-50s, I've been unable to walk without a cane. Moreover, my apartment is quite old, necessitating the use of stairs to move in and out, which is challenging since my room is on the 5th floor. This makes daily climbs up and down the stairs quite difficult with my mobility issues. Consequently, I find myself increasingly confined to my room. Fortunately, I have the inheritance Matthew left behind, so I won't struggle financially for the time being, but I'm more worried about becoming mentally isolated. Dorothy visits once a week to check on me. She runs a home-based restaurant and brings leftovers to share, which brightens my mood a bit, but I feel lonely again once she leaves. I've had no contact with my son, Thomas, since he left home after graduating high school. And I have no idea where he is or what he's doing. I had resigned myself to the fact that he's always been that way and wouldn't likely visit. Then, seeing an advertisement for a real estate agent in the newspaper, I thought it might be time to move into a barrier-free home. A barrier-free home would eliminate the need for stairs, making outings, including shopping, much easier. A small house would suffice, affordable with Matthew's inheritance. After all, it would only be me, an elderly woman, living there, so a compact space is all I need. I decided to visit a real estate agent. What surprised me recently was the abundance of vacant homes, more than I had imagined. I knew from TV news that many properties were without buyers or renters, despite being livable. Some were equipped with ramps and handrails for barrier-free access. I thought it was a waste, but according to the real estate agent, these homes were often vacated by elderly individuals who moved to facilities soon after renovations. The size and number of rooms were just right for me, and the purchase price was about 80% of what I had expected. Plus, the location, within walking distance to supermarkets and parks, encouraged me. A light walk would be possible, promising a healthier retirement life than staying cooped up at home. I began to fantasize about installing playground equipment for Dorothy's grandchildren to play with if she ever had any.
How about it? I've decided. This is the place.
I decided to buy that house. A few days later, Thomas, who hadn't contacted me in 18 years, finally called. My heart fluttered when I saw Thomas's name on the screen. Ah, good. Your phone number hasn't changed. Though it was over the phone, Thomas's voice sounded different, but the way he spoke was unmistakably Thomas. Thomas, where have you been and what have you been doing all this time? Before I could express my joy at hearing Thomas's voice after so long, my anger burst forth. Thomas responded in a calm tone, seemingly unfazed by my scolding. Long time no see. How have you been recently? He asked as if we had only spoken a few months ago.
I've been doing well. How about you, Thomas? Are you doing okay?
I'm getting by. How about you, Mom? Any changes recently? Thomas lightly dodged my question, attempting to inquire about my recent life.
I finally get to hear your voice after so long, so let's talk more calmly. I want to know more about you, Thomas.
Oh, sorry. So, any changes recently? Thomas either listened or didn't, insisting on knowing about my recent life.
Thomas, I heard you married a woman named Jessica?
There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone.
How did you know? Who told you? I heard it from Anthony, Thomas's classmate.
Anthony, huh? Yeah, I did. But, more importantly, how are you doing? I was frustrated by Thomas's reluctance to talk about himself. But hearing Thomas's voice for the first time in 18 years made me tear up. Happy that he was alive and well, regardless of his whereabouts.
If you got married, you should have told me properly. Come visit sometime and introduce Jessica, okay?
I said in a scolding tone, hiding my happiness from Thomas. Got it. But how are you, Mom? Are you managing okay on your own? I wondered why he avoided talking about himself. Thomas was keen to know about my life, but refused to talk about his own, making it feel like he was avoiding the subject. Is everything not going well? What are you working as? Can you make ends meet? I work part-time, but I'm getting by. Tell me more about you, Mom. Since Thomas was so fixated on my life, I decided to give in and tell him about my current plans.
Actually, I'm thinking of moving from my current house to a barrier-free detached house.
So, that story was true. I could sense excitement in Thomas's voice. What kind of house is it? It's bigger than the one you're living in now, right? How big is it? How many rooms does it have? How big is the yard? Thomas bombarded me with questions, which surprised me.
Calm down, Thomas. What's gotten into you?
Then, Thomas's tone softened as if he had come to his senses. No, it's nothing. Don't worry about anything, Mom. I was concerned by Thomas's phrasing. And the sudden call after 18 years of silence, especially his keen interest in the new property I was purchasing.
Are you really okay? Is there something you're worried about?
Thomas had always been like this since he was a child. Avoiding direct topics and subtly checking on my situation when he thought he might be in trouble. Then reluctantly telling the truth when the time was right. I couldn't help feeling anxious that Thomas hadn't grown up even now. I'm really okay. There's nothing for you to worry about with me. Don't worry about anything. Thank you, Mom. I chose to take Thomas's words of gratitude at face value. Above all, I was happy that Thomas was alive and well.
Come visit sometimes. Bring Jessica along. If you let me know in advance, I'll prepare a meal and wait for you.
About that. Thomas hesitated to continue. I sensed that Thomas's true feelings would be revealed in his next words.
Speak up if you have something to say.
We're thinking about living with you, Mom. At those words, my heart leaped. Even though Dorothy comes to visit once a week, it's lonely without someone around. The idea that Thomas proposed living together was a joy for me.
Really? What does Jessica say? Is she okay with it?
Hearing about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict being common, I couldn't deny the possibility of Jessica being against it even if Thomas was fine. But Thomas confidently assured me there was no need to worry. Jessica's okay with living with you too. You know, given your age, it would be tough on you to be alone, right? Thomas and Jessica must be worried about me getting older. Their kindness brought me to tears. Leave your care to us. We want to make up for leaving Mom alone for 18 years.
It means a lot to hear you say that. Are you sure, Thomas?
Of course. It was Jessica's idea, actually. She wants to take care of you, Mom, so don't worry. Saying that, Thomas laughed on the phone, but I felt uneasy. I couldn't quite explain it, but something about Thomas's tone seemed too cheerful. Yet, I chose to interpret it as happiness about our living together. After hanging up the call with Thomas, my mind was already filled with plans for our life together. I imagined the layout of the new house we planned to buy.
The spare bedroom could be for Thomas and Jessica, no problem.
Losing Matthew and not having anyone to talk to, I often found myself talking aloud. But I didn't feel lonely now. Thomas had said he was okay with living together. And so had Jessica. I couldn't ask for more happiness. Thinking about them taking care of me in my old age, and if Thomas and Jessica had children, the house would be lively and fun. There's a farm nearby that can be rented, so a family garden might be a good idea for weekends. My positive daydreaming just kept expanding. Then, my mobile phone rang again. It was from Dorothy.
I wonder if Dorothy wants to live with us too, following Thomas. What would we do if that happened? The house would be too small.
Smiling at my predicament, I answered the phone. Mom, I just got a call from Thomas.
What's up? Did you already talk to Thomas?
I hoped to surprise Dorothy by mentioning Thomas's call, so I was a bit disappointed. Thomas had called Dorothy before me. Thomas called you too, huh?
Yes. About 10 minutes ago. He said he's okay with living together after not contacting us for 18 years. Thomas has grown up without me knowing.
I couldn't help but express my happiness. Then, Dorothy sighed deeply on the other end. So that's what this is about.
What's wrong? Did you want to live with us too?
It's not about that. It's about Thomas. He has no intention of taking care of you, Mom.
What do you mean?
Dorothy sounded a bit irritated, but she took a deep breath to calm down before speaking slowly. Before he called you, he called me. Guess what he said? If he could live with us.
What do you mean? Thomas said he wanted to live with me. Jessica agreed too.
That's a lie. There's no way he's thinking about living with both me and you at the same time. Thinking calmly, Dorothy's words made sense. Thomas's story was contradictory. Yet, I couldn't let go of the hope for living with Thomas.
Wait. I'll call Thomas again and find out what's going on.
It's useless. He'll just talk his way out of it with some flimsy excuse again. Listen, Mom, you absolutely must not get involved with him. He'll sweet-talk you, and you'll end up being deceived. Dorothy stopped me with an unusually stern tone. I was at a loss for words in response to Dorothy's attitude, which allowed for such harsh criticism of Thomas. He's probably struggling with living expenses, so he thought about living at my place first. But after I refused, he reluctantly turned to you. Dorothy regained her composure and spoke to me in a calm manner, as if advising me. I was beginning to think something was off with Thomas, too. He never talked about his own situation, but bombarded me with questions about mine, especially about buying a new house. In my joy at the thought of living with Thomas, I might have been all too ready to be duped, despite my doubts. It seems Thomas has just gotten better at lying, not that he had a change of heart. The dream of a happy life surrounded by family that had grown in my mind crumbled to pieces. I got a call from him just now about living with you, and he sounded way too pleased about it. He plans to live there without working. Dorothy went on to share some shocking truths Jessica had let slip. And I overheard Jessica on the phone saying, "Now we have a good housekeeper." She was laughing about you like that. Hearing this, I was stunned. What on earth do Thomas and Jessica think of me? People with that kind of mindset could never take care of you, Mom. My hopes for Thomas had vanished. More than anything, I didn't want the no-good Thomas living in the new house I had put a deposit on. The betrayal turned into resentment over time.
It's troubling. Is there any way to kick Thomas and Jessica out?
I decided to seek Dorothy's reliable advice. Thomas, perhaps thinking his motives weren't yet apparent, texted me his phone number. The message came with it, "This is Jessica's number," implying that I would need it to communicate frequently with Jessica from now on. But having been informed by Dorothy of Thomas and Jessica's true intentions, I had completely abandoned any hope for Thomas. No matter how sweetly he might approach me now, I had no intention of welcoming him. Whether he apologizes in front of my house or whatever he does, as far as I'm concerned, I never had a son named Thomas. From now on, I've decided Dorothy is my only child and dear family. The precious things Matthew left behind won't be taken by Thomas and Jessica, who never cared about their parents. Not even when Matthew was hospitalized and sick did Thomas show his face or contact us. From now on, whatever happens to him, I couldn't care less. He's a stranger to me, not my son or anything. Presumably after getting my number from Thomas, Jessica began calling frequently, but I decided to completely ignore her. Getting irritated by the persistent calls every day, I finally decided to block her number. The call log showed 37 missed calls, but I never returned any, and the contact from Jessica ceased. She might still be trying to reach out, but having blocked her, it doesn't matter to me anymore. How have you been? Any contact from Thomas? Occasionally, Dorothy comes by after work with leftovers from the restaurant and checks in on me, but I just smile and shake my head. There's no contact because I blocked the calls. It's been stuck at 37 missed calls. I wonder if their phone bill is the one that's really suffering? I said, with a hint of sarcasm, and Dorothy laughed. About a month into my decision to ignore them, Dorothy's mobile phone began to ring. From Thomas. Mom, what should we do? Apparently, Thomas had called Dorothy, deciding that Jessica was no longer an option. I'll leave it up to your judgment. I am a bit curious about what's going on with them, though. When I said this, Dorothy laughed and responded. I was thinking of ignoring them, but I'm actually quite curious to see what's become of them, too. Dorothy, with a broad smile, answered Thomas's call. What's going on? Instead of Thomas, it was Jessica's shouting voice that came through the phone. Screaming like a howling wolf, loud enough for me to hear from a distance. Directly exposed to the yelling, Dorothy quickly pulled the mobile phone away from her ear and calmly soothed Jessica like a zookeeper calming a wild animal. You don't need to shout. I can hear you just fine. It was my first time hearing Jessica's voice, and she seemed like a peculiar person for speaking to her husband's family with such a confrontational attitude. To be able to hurl such insults at a family you've never even met, you must be quite lacking in common sense. Dorothy, holding back laughter, retorted to Jessica's complaints. Jessica lowered her tone a bit, but her voice was still powerful enough to reach my ears. Explain clearly what's going on. Why is nobody living there? We went to the new house we bought, and they say it hasn't been purchased yet. Dorothy occasionally pulled the phone away from her ear, trying to make sense of the other side's argument. Calm down, Jessica. You don't need to shout. I can hear you. Put it on speakerphone. I want to listen too. I found this unusual character, Jessica, amusing and couldn't help but want to hear more. Mom sure is curious. Dorothy switched to speakerphone, and Jessica's screaming voice echoed throughout the room. I felt a momentary pang of guilt for possibly disturbing the neighbors, but figured everyone was likely out at this time of day and nobody was around. Besides, Jessica was the one bothering to call and complain at such an hour. All right. I'll explain it to you in a way even you can understand, so listen carefully. Then Dorothy began to slowly explain the method of retaliation we had employed over the last month. Truth be told, that new house isn't actually Mom's property yet. We hadn't decided whether to buy that house yet. What do you mean? You said you were moving to a new place because of an inheritance. We tried to move our stuff in, but were stopped by the manager. The real estate agent showed up, and we even got scolded by the police. Hearing Jessica's outcry about the police ordeal, Dorothy and I couldn't contain our laughter any longer and burst out laughing. Hey, stop laughing. I can hear everything. You tricked us. What are you talking about? You two were the first to try and deceive Mom. Weren't you trying to ingratiate yourselves with Mom now that she's alone to move in? Dorothy, appalled by Jessica's selfish reasoning, calmly countered. Indeed, I had planned to purchase that new house. But after learning of Thomas and Jessica's motives, I reconsidered. I consulted Dorothy about possibly canceling the purchase, and she informed me it could be canceled by forfeiting it.
So, that house was never actually purchased by Mom. Was that your idea? Don't interfere unnecessarily.
Hearing the growling on the other end, Dorothy once again pulled the mobile phone away from her ear.
Just tell me where Mary is. Don't mess around.
As I laughed off their demands and protests, Dorothy sharply retorted.
I wouldn't tell someone who calls Mom a housekeeper. How did you know? No, that must be a mistake. I don't remember saying anything that terrible. You might not be aware of it, but your voice is quite loud. If you speak that loudly, it can be heard even without directly holding the mobile phone.
Silenced by Dorothy's comeback, Jessica fell quiet. Then the voice changed to Thomas's. Dorothy, you know Mom's legs aren't what they used to be. We need to take care of her. I found it amusing to picture Thomas's desperate tone on the other end of the line. He was saying all the right things, but it was too late for any care to make a difference. If I hadn't realized Thomas and Jessica's plot by now, they would have surely treated me as a convenient housekeeper. Thomas's attitude, claiming such insincere intentions so blatantly, was both funny and a bit sad.
Anyway, you two have no business worrying about me or telling me anything.
With that, Dorothy dismissed Thomas with finality. We'll figure it out ourselves. The call ended with Thomas hanging up angrily.
Was that the right thing to do? It's their own fault. Idiots like them won't learn unless they face the consequences,
Dorothy said, smiling triumphantly. A few days later, Dorothy came to visit my house with leftovers from the restaurant.
What's happened since then? Did Thomas and Jessica say anything?
I was curious about the continuation of the incident and asked Dorothy. Dorothy answers with a big smile. Plenty. Seems like they've gotten themselves into quite a mess. Dorothy shared with a full smile the current predicament of Thomas and Jessica. That afternoon, Thomas had called Dorothy pleading for help.
Please, Dorothy. We're family, help us.
Thomas was crying on the phone.
The truth is, we're being chased for debts.
Thomas and Jessica had planned to rely on my new home and wealth from the start, thinking they could live comfortably without working by quitting their part-time jobs. In other words, he currently has no money. Now, without any money, after I canceled the purchase of the new house, they moved into a rundown apartment nearby, but soon couldn't afford the rent and were evicted. Ordinarily, they might have returned to part-time work, but they chose an unexpected path. The two of them borrowed a large sum from dubious lenders in hopes of striking it rich through gambling. I could almost see Jessica's face, someone I had never met. We can't go back to part-time work now. We'll make a fortune from gambling and show them. Imagining Jessica saying such a line, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Thomas and Jessica, having gambled away borrowed money, were now on the run from debt collectors.
So, I told Thomas this. Never to involve you or me in their lives ever again.
Dorothy, you always have to deal with so much. I expressed my concern for Dorothy's troubles. Later, I decided to move into a care facility that Dorothy found for me. This way, Thomas and them won't be able to approach. But are you sure you won't be lonely, Mom? I smiled and shook my head.
You've done so well for me. And this hamburger is delicious.
Thank you. It's popular with the customers too. Dorothy would sometimes bring leftovers from the restaurant, so I never felt lonely. Mom, I have a suggestion. Dorothy began with a serious tone. My husband and I have been thinking about building a new house soon.
That sounds wonderful. I'm sure it will be a beautiful home.
As my eyes lit up, Dorothy took my hand and said, If it happens, would you like to help out at our store? Only if you're okay with it, of course. I was just getting tired of the same daily walks around the facility.
Don't underestimate me because I'm old. I can still do my part when needed.
You would say that, I knew it. So, it's decided then. We'll make sure there's plenty of space around the cash register so you can easily fit. The thought of starting work at the store fills me with so much anticipation that I can't help but smile. I still haven't been able to get in touch with Thomas and the others, but at this point, there's nothing I can do about it. Whatever happens to them, it has nothing to do with me. Watched over by my beloved Dorothy, I've sworn to myself that I'll live my life without worrying about Thomas anymore.
Your son made me pregnant. Excuse me? Pay $30,000 as alimony.
When I picked up the restaurant's phone, I was told that with a young woman's voice suddenly. She was utterly one-sided in the conversation and not even giving her name. I completely underestimated that must be a prank call. So I never expected that this call would lead to such a mess. My name is Melissa Brown. This may sound self-flattering, but I run a popular restaurant somewhere in New York City. We have been featured on national television and in magazines, and thanks to that almost every seat for lunch and dinner is booked every day. However, because of being famous, nuisance calls and aggressive sales pitches increased. So I got quite sloppy with this call because I thought it was just another prank. But when I was told over the phone to my restaurant that got pregnant, I was actually taken aback and I could hardly understand what she was saying. I do have a son, but the thought of him getting someone pregnant seemed absurd. Yet this prank call with its shocking accusations intrigued me. I decided to listen to her story for a bit out of fun.
I had an abortion. What are you going to do about the wounds on my body and soul? Pay for the surgery too.
First off, if I may ask who I am speaking to? Even when dealing with prank calls, one of the challenges of the service industry is having to respond politely. It would be a nuisance if our conversation were recorded and exaggerated with false information being spread around.
I'm a customer at your restaurant. Is that the first thing you have to say to me after your son hurt me? Your family lacks both common sense and compassion.
I find it hard to believe my son would do such a thing. My staff in the kitchen and at the counter glance over at me as they sense this isn't a usual dinner reservation call. I smiled and waved at them to make them feel safe and assuring them that everything is all right.
Your son assaulted me on a dark street.
And you recognized him in the dark?
Of course.
But are you sure it was my son?
Don't play dumb. I'm absolutely certain. It was your son who lives with you. I've been so scared since then, I even can't go out alone. What are you going to do about this?
She started detailing how the assault had happened. I think you might be mistaking my son for someone else. But this seems like a serious matter. Can we meet in person to discuss it? Most people who make prank calls like these tend to shy away from meeting face-to-face. So suggesting a meeting is a good way to get them to back down. In the beginning I was merely entertaining her call out of fun, but as it seemed to be dragging on, I proposed the meeting to end the call soon.
You saying, meet with the criminal's parent? How dare you suggest that kind of thing to a victim?
But I'd like to verify your story in person.
Are you saying I'm lying?
That's not what I mean. To be honest, I wanted to say you're lying, aren't you? But I held back. Then she started berating me and saying,
I can't believe a person like you is a business owner.
Why don't we meet and talk about this anyway? No matter how many times I suggested it, she continually refused to meet. I see. So what do you want me to do?
Pay me alimony. $30,000.
But it's a case of mistaken identity anyways, and also I can't afford such a large amount of money.
You can pay. I know your business is thriving. Pay it or I'll sue you.
Even though my business is thriving, it's just a small place and $30,000 is a large amount of money and I don't even intend to pay.
Are you sure you want to involve the police?
I don't mind. At my unhesitant response, the woman fell silent for a moment.
If my son truly did such a thing, I should hold him accountable as a parent. But I don't think he did. You're pretty confident he didn't do it, huh? Maybe you should have some doubts about your own son.
I would believe it if there was evidence. Do you have any?
Evidence?
I'd be troubled if you asked me for money without any proof. There was silence on the other end of the phone as the woman seemed to be contemplating something.
If there's no proof, I'm hanging up.
I said that and trying to end the call, then.
Hold on. If there's evidence, you'll pay the alimony, right?
Well, I would consider it.
Then wait. I'll bring the evidence.
With that, she hung up the phone almost as soon as she had finished speaking.
Owner, are you all right?
There's no problem. It's just a prank call. One of my employees, Mr. Murphy, voiced his concern, so I reassured him like that. There's no way she has any proof, so I don't expect she'll call back again. But I have an uneasy feeling that she might barge in and cause a scene at the restaurant. In the evening, while preparing for dinner, I had completely forgotten about the phone call. Mr. Murphy ran up to me, holding a manila envelope in his hand with his face as pale as a ghost. What's the matter? It's not like you to run in the restaurant.
Owner, this came.
What he handed me was a letter. Ms. Melissa Brown.
I was assaulted and impregnated by your son.
Please transfer $30,000 as alimony. Written below were the bank transfer details and the recipient's name was Karen Williams. Mr. Murphy was pale and disturbed because he was the first to see the contents of the unsealed and unsigned letter. Calm down. But you know my son, right? Hearing this, he seemed relieved. There was something else in the envelope. I pulled it out and it was a pregnancy test.
What's that?
This commotion attracted the other employees. All of them seemed taken aback.
Could it really be the owner's son?
Some employees gave me a contemptuous look, but they were quickly convinced when I explained. I put away the things that had been sent on my desk and returned to my usual work. A few days passed without transferring any money, but during this time there was an unsettling incident. Owner, this came again. Mr. Murphy came with the manila envelope in his hand and looking fed up.
I see. Check the contents and put it away in the usual place.
Recently, these harassing letters had been dropped in the restaurant's mailbox many times a day.
Are you planning to run?
Pay up.
The owner is a parent of a criminal. Her son got a college girl pregnant and didn't even apologize. The owner of this restaurant is a heartless and cruel woman with no sincerity. Irresponsible, overprotective, toxic parent. It's your fault your son became like that.
Take responsibility.
I'll make sure no customers come to this restaurant. It's for the good of the world, for the good of the people. I wonder what would make customers stop coming to a restaurant. Like those restaurants where they put that greasy, black, and disgusting thing in the food. I wouldn't go there again, that's for sure.
The content escalates progressively and the last part is practically a threat. Thankfully, no claims have been made that anything is actually in our food. But the constant anxiety that we might be set up is exhausting. Amid all this, something caught my attention.
Well, again, a vacant seat increased at lunch.
The number of customers was just gradually decreasing. Yes, it's unusual. Today we even had 2 tables empty. My thoughts went out to the poor ingredients waiting to be prepared in the kitchen.
Owner,
I looked up at Mr. Murphy's call to see him heading my way with his laptop.
Look at this review site.
On the laptop screen, the latest reviews were filled with harsh, slanderous comments. Bad customer service. They don't listen to the customers. Especially the owner, who seems to be getting full of herself after appearing on TV and in magazines. The food is getting worse. The soup taste was way more plain than the last time I visited. I saw an employee drop a piece of meat before grilling and sneak it back. Every single day poor reviews were posted, causing our star rating to plummet. I realized that I was shaking with anger. It's unacceptable. Why should this restaurant, which we've worked so hard to build with the intention of pleasing our customers, be wounded by such baseless accusations? Are the preparations progressing? An unfamiliarly low and cold voice involuntarily slipped from my mouth. Yes, they're almost completed. Upon hearing Mr. Murphy's response, I couldn't help but smirk. It's been a week since we discovered the slanderous comments on the review site. Since then, the number of customers has continued to dwindle. When I stepped out into the dining area, Mr. Anderson, a regular, was sitting at the counter next to a young woman. Mr. Anderson, thank you as always. It's tough for you lately, Melissa. When I greeted him, Mr. Anderson offered me words of consolation. Well, this job is my lifeline. I smiled and replied. Mr. Anderson shook his head sympathetically then. You're strong. Especially considering your son's predicament. But don't lose hope. I'm on your side, Melissa. We'll support your son as he atones for his actions. What? I was taken aback and couldn't understand what he was talking about. Well, I noticed this place is quieter than usual, so I was wondering what happened. Then this young lady here kindly showed me a web page about this restaurant. With that, he gestured towards the pretty woman in her early 20s sitting next to him. I really feel for you. I love this place, so I thought I'd come here more often to help out in any way I can. Come to think of it, I recalled seeing this girl in the restaurant quite frequently recently. Excuse me, but what's written here is a misunderstanding. The regulars here were wondering why the place has been so empty recently. So I explained it to them. What? I doubted my own ears and trying to make sense of what she was saying. I mean, isn't it sad not to know the truth? Besides, I thought the owner would be happy to know that people like me and Mr. Anderson still come to this place. You've been spreading online rumors which we're not even sure of to our patrons? I unintentionally raised my voice, forgetting all about formality. Wow, it's scary. The internet says the owner is a terrible person, and I thought it wasn't true. But it seems you really are like the parent of a man who assaulted women. I suggest that you should apologize if you think you did something wrong. She twisted away from me. Her movements were as if she expected me to punch her even though I had not raised a hand. Miss, that's not a nice way to talk. Melissa is probably tired from all the things happening. Mr. Anderson defended me, but that wasn't the point. I was about to explain that the fundamental issue was different than suddenly her bag fell from the back of her chair. It must have moved while she was twisting and turning. Despite my simmering rage towards her, my service industry instinct kicked in and I moved to pick up her bag. But then I saw it. Karen Williams. The name written on the student ID card that had fallen out stopped me in my tracks. No worries, I'll pick it up myself. She hurriedly got off her chair to pick up her bag and ID, but I got there first. Hey, give it back. But it wasn't a mistake. That name was the one on that letter with a pregnancy test, which wouldn't serve as evidence of anything. So it was you. I've been looking for you, Karen Williams. I must have swapped it with a friend's by mistake.
I'm not Karen. Your face and the one on the ID are the same.
Interesting.
So you're a student at Central College. No, I'm telling you, you're mistaken.
Beside her, who started being flustered, Mr. Anderson was clearly puzzled and having no idea what was going on.
I'm going to sue you.
My words, spoken in front of a few scattered patrons, caused everyone in the bar to turn around.
What? What did I do? I believe you're the one who knows really well what you did.
Since we're all here, why don't we let everyone hear? I looked around the bar. It was mostly filled with regulars. While it's nice to have regulars, it meant that almost no new customers were coming in. I couldn't help but feel furious about this young woman disrupting our business.
Let me start. Are you the one who called claiming my son assaulted you and impregnated you? Demanding alimony?
I glared at her and pressing her for an answer.
Yes, that's me. I'm the one your son assaulted.
Seeing that there was no way to deny it anymore, she admitted it surprisingly readily.
What? You want to embarrass me in front of all these people? This could backfire, you know, considering the reputation of your bar.
She crossed her arms defiantly and completely brazen. Her attitude only served to fuel my anger further. Mr. Murphy, bring everything over. I instructed him to hurry up and bring me a laptop from the store's office along with a stack of envelopes and documents that could be about 4 inches high.
Was it you who kept sending harassing letters to the store over and over again?
I read some of the letters in a loud voice so that other customers in the store can hear.
Pay up or run. This owner is a criminal's parent. Her son impregnates a college girl and doesn't even apologize. Poor souls being forced to eat food from this woman's restaurant. I'm sure I'm going to make customers not come to the store. It's for the greater good.
Some were covering their mouths at the harsh words among the regulars who heard the content.
This is completely threatening. There's no evidence that I sent this letter. Maybe some outsider who heard the rumors sent it just for fun.
As she was desperately making excuses, I silently opened my laptop and presented her with the screen of another review site.
Some of you here may have seen this, the defamation on this review site. You did this too, right? I'm saying, where is the evidence? Are you all right in the head?
Evidence, evidence.
You seem to love evidence so much. Even though the one you presented is such a mess.
I showed the first received letter and the pregnancy test to Mr. Anderson, who was nearby. This is the pregnancy test she brought as evidence. What do you think?
Isn't this red line just a marker? Even my old eyes can see that.
The customers who were listening started to buzz.
But this might not prove that I was assaulted, but it doesn't prove that I'm wrong either.
No matter what happens, she is insisting and shouting angrily that she is the victim.
I was assaulted by your son. He said it himself. It's disrespectful to doubt that.
The customers are whispering in hushed tones and seems not sure whom to believe.
Since I, the victim, am saying it, it must be absolutely true.
She started to cry as if to attract sympathy.
Well, I'll prove it then. My son, he's 3 years old yet.
Upon hearing this decisive fact, she let out a small
"What?"
as if deflated.
My son may be a bit rambunctious and strong for a 3-year-old, but there's no way he could assault you. No way. I know you have a big son. You live together, right? I even have a picture. I heard you talking about dinner.
Saying that, she pulled out her smartphone and showed a picture of what looked like a young man talking to me at the back door of the store.
Oh, isn't that Taylor? See. You do have 2 sons.
Perhaps regaining confidence from correctly naming the person in the photo, her tone increased. That's not correct. I immediately denied what she said.
Then who is this person? Don't tell me he's your lover? Having an affair with a younger guy and then that guy impregnates a college girl, what a scandal. Not only is your store done for, but your marriage too.
To her triumphant words, I revealed something.
This is my niece. Your niece?
Yes, and actually it's a girl. I explained that my niece is tomboyish and is often mistaken for a boy even as an adult. She's a college student, and as she boards at my place, I ask her to cook dinner and pick up my son as a form of rent payment.
If you need evidence, want me to bring her in person for you to check?
I told this to her, who stood there shocked and seemingly unable to hear me.
By the way, I've already gathered all the evidence about the harassment letter and the posts on the review site.
Evidence? No way. She seemed like she might collapse any second and turned to face me weakly.
I've already consulted with the police and my attorney.
I explained step by step the preparations I've made with the help of Mr. Murphy, one of my employees. The first piece of evidence was a letter from her with fingerprints that matched those found on the harassment letter. All posts on the review site were confirmed to be from the same person after a disclosure request. With no way out, she sunk to the floor as she drained.
You were just saying that it's better to apologize quickly if you've done something wrong, weren't you?
She mumbled something while looking pale and looking down, but I couldn't make out whether it was an apology.
I will contact the police about you. I'll inform your parents and your college as well. Be prepared for a lawsuit for emotional distress damages. No, please don't do that. I'm still a student. Please spare me. You may be a student, but you're an adult, over 18 years old. You will take responsibility for your actions. I can't handle that. Please, stop.
Subsequently, I filed a criminal complaint against Karen Williams for defamation and business obstruction, as well as for damages to the shop. Apparently, she had always been a big spender, buying brand bags and clothes on credit, and ended up committing these crimes after she was unable to make her payments. As a result, she was expelled from her college. This incident even made the news, and I've heard that now she is the one who has been receiving harassments after her personal information was exposed. Through my lawyer, all the slanderous posts on the review site were deleted. The uproar unexpectedly turned into a positive result as it cleared up the misunderstandings among my regular customers. Now the number of customers has returned to normal. While the incident did deter new customers, there were almost no regulars who left, even despite all the lies that Karen had been spreading. There's no doubt that it was pleasing to know that her claims weren't taken at face value. Moving forward, I aim to continue running the restaurant to meet the trust of my customers. Mom, actually. I looked down at my daughter, Lucy, in surprise. It was the first time she had called me Mom. Lucy, my husband's child from a previous marriage, hadn't warmed up to me all over the past year. But now, she had called me that for the first time. I almost teared up as she reached out her right hand to me. In her open palm lay a single ring.
What's this?
On closer inspection, it was a wedding ring. Judging by its size, it belonged to a woman. It's for Mom, who gave birth to me. I squatted down in front of a trembling, downcast Lucy.
Your real mom's, huh? Do you want to meet her?
My husband was overseas on a business trip. I gently asked, thinking she must be feeling lonely with just the two of us, strangers, at home. No. I want you to throw this away.
What?
As you know. As I listened to Lucy, I could feel myself getting enveloped in anger. I should leave, shouldn't I? I hugged my 10-year-old daughter, who had come to such a conclusion, tightly. Stroking Lucy's crying head, I whispered softly. Tell her tomorrow, as you wish. I won't let anyone make my daughter cry. She'll get what she deserves. My name is Kate. I'm 29 years old. I got married last year and am now a stay-at-home wife. My husband, Mike, is 37 years old, and this is a second marriage for both of us. We met at work. Aside from the fact that the workplace was my father's company, it was a very normal relationship between colleagues. By the time I joined, he had already divorced his previous wife, but he was a very reliable presence as a colleague. Lucy, his daughter from that marriage, is 10 years old. Even a year after marrying Mike, she hasn't warmed up to me at all. Lucy would answer when I asked her something. She would eat her meals without leaving anything behind. But she never initiated conversation with me or talked about school or her friends. I suppose it's part of being a teenager, but it still made me feel lonely. I heard that the divorce with Lucy's real mother, and was bitter. She drank a lot and was unfaithful. Mike had said that if it weren't for Lucy, he would have divorced her much sooner. Sometimes when he came home late at night, the house would be empty. There were several occasions when Lucy, still a preschooler at the time, was left home alone, crying. So, they fought often. Lucy, seeing her parents like this, kept crying and saying she didn't want them to separate.
Lucy was really pitiable back then.
Mike had said. Certainly, being left alone, feeling lonely and scared, crying. Then, because of that, seeing her parents fighting. It was a time when she should have been more and more spoiled by her mom. Instead of just playing, laughing with friends, being unconditionally loved by her parents, and going to sleep happily every night. When she was in kindergarten, those days should have been the norm. I wanted to tell and to her face that she was a failure as a mother. On the day Lucy became a second grader and disappeared, leaving only the ring and a signed divorce petition on the table. The breakfast dishes were left unwashed, and the laundry was undone. Lucy probably didn't even know what a divorce petition was. Thinking about Lucy waiting for her mother's return in such a home made me feel unbearable. A year later, Mike was raising Lucy alone. Even before that, Mike often taught me a lot about work and helped me out. So, I tried to take some of his work off his shoulders and stayed late with him so he could go home earlier. But it wasn't just me. Everyone helped Mike, who was capable and kind at work. When the elementary school called to say Lucy had a high fever, I was the one who made a fuss.
Please go home early. It's pitiful she's running a fever. But I have a meeting this afternoon. At least let me make an apology call. Manager. It's okay if he leaves now, right? I'll make the apology call to the meeting attendees.
My voice seemed to echo down the hallway. I'll explain to the meeting attendees myself, said my father, who happened to be passing by in the hallway, allowing Mike to leave immediately. After work, I also visited Lucy to cheer her up, and this event brought Mike and me even closer than before. Knowing his accomplishments and character at the company, my parents didn't oppose my marriage to Mike, who had a history of divorce, at all. I think of Lucy as my real family. But reality is harsh. Contrary to my feelings, even a year after getting married, Lucy hadn't warmed up to me. But, on the night Mike left for an overseas business trip, Lucy approached me. Mom, actually. I stopped what I was doing in the kitchen and turned around. I looked down at Lucy, incredulous. Finally, she had called me that for the first time. Tears welled up in my eyes. I almost burst into tears. Sniffling, I looked at Lucy's right hand that she held out to me. In her open palm was a small ring.
What's this?
It was a wedding ring upon closer inspection. Likely belonging to a woman. It's from the mom who gave birth to me. I wiped my hands on my apron and squatted down in front of Lucy, who was looking down and trembling. Even if she was a terrible mother, she might still be important to Lucy. My husband was overseas on a business trip and would be away for a while. I gently asked, thinking she must be feeling lonely with just the two of us, strangers, at home.
So she's your real mom, huh? Do you want to meet her?
But Lucy shook her head. I want you to throw this away.
What? Why?
I asked, puzzled by her sudden request. I met Mom yesterday.
Yesterday? When yesterday?
After school. Not just yesterday. I've seen Mom several times on my way home from school, asking about my new mom. Even when I say I don't know, she keeps asking.
About me?
I wondered why. The last bit of maternal love? Did she want to make sure her daughter was being taken care of? My thoughts were completely betrayed. The new mom, you're rich, right? I heard Dad works for the company owned by your father, right? Chills ran down my spine. An indescribable sense of disgust rose within me.
Anything else? Didn't she say anything else?
She said she met Dad too. Told him to hand over Lucy or bring money. But it seems Dad doesn't have much money. Next, she said she'd tell the new mom, so you should make a fuss about not wanting to go. Lucy started crying. I felt myself getting enveloped in anger. I should leave, shouldn't I? I hugged my 10-year-old daughter, who had come to such a conclusion, tightly. Stroking Lucy's crying head, I whispered softly,
Tell her tomorrow, as you wish.
I won't recognize such a person as a mother. I won't let anyone make my daughter cry. She'll get what she deserves. That night, after Lucy went to sleep, I called Mike. I wanted to confirm what Lucy had told me today.
It's true. I didn't tell Kate because I didn't want to worry her, but to ambush Lucy. I didn't know she was meeting Lucy too. This is the first I've heard. But I did ask Lucy if she wanted to live with her previous mom. She's no good, but she is Lucy's real mother. However, Lucy said no. She wants to stay here. So, I thought I'd handle it myself. It seems she's been coming to meet Lucy quite often.
Anne. I could feel Mike's anger through the phone. I understand how you feel. Anyway, I'll go meet and with Lucy on the next school holiday. Mike sounded panicked at my words.
Wait. Can't you wait until I return home? It's impossible. That woman made Lucy cry. I can't stay silent any longer. Don't worry, Mike,
I said and hung up. The next day, while organizing my room, Lucy came back from school.
How was it? Was she there today? Did she give you the note?
Yes. She said to make sure to come on Saturday at 10 a.m.
Good. Thank you.
The note I specified was for a meeting at a cafe on Saturday, a school holiday, with the three of us. She'll come thinking she'll just get money without any suspicion. Seeing Lucy's downcast face,
Then let's go buy some clothes to wear,
I suggested.
Eh? Yes, we have to dress up. Since Saturday will be the last day you'll see her.
I confirmed with Lucy, who was frozen.
Are you really okay with not seeing her anymore?
Yes. I don't want to see someone who troubles Dad and Mom anymore. Lucy answered firmly with determined eyes.
Then I'll get ready, so go wash your hands and gargle. There's a snack in the fridge.
I watched Lucy run energetically to the washroom and started putting the old books I had taken out into a paper bag. Lucy and I, dressed in clothes that anyone could tell were from high-end brands at a glance, headed to the cafe for our appointment. I wouldn't normally choose clothes this way. Whether expensive or cheap, I want to dress Lucy in clothes that suit her, that she likes. But today alone, even this serves as an attack on the other party.
Lucy, no matter what I say or what she says, will you trust me?
After nodding, Lucy and I entered the cafe hand in hand, confidently. Oh, Lucy. Dressed in such nice clothes. They suit you well. Anne, who had arrived earlier, said with a broad smile upon seeing Lucy. Come sit next to me. Ignoring Anne's words, Lucy sat next to me. Anne's face twitched slightly, but she managed a smile. I too smiled and deliberately placed a heavy paper bag and a branded bag in front of Lucy.
Keep an eye on this, it's important.
Anne's eyes changed. She stared at the paper bag, thinking it contained luxury bags and money. I ordered coffee for myself and a cake set for Lucy. After introducing ourselves, I quickly brought up the topic. So you want to take Lucy back? That's right. She's my dear daughter, after all. I want to raise her myself. Is that so? I heard from Mike that, Kate, you've been treating Lucy like your own daughter, haven't you?
Yes, of course.
And so, it pains me to take Lucy away from you. Instead, I was thinking, maybe I could receive something in return, you know? I pretended to be confused and tilted my head. In return? What kind of? You know what I mean. Sorry, I'm not quite familiar with these things. There was a silence, and I sipped my coffee. To Lucy, who had been looking down at her mobile phone.
Eat up. It's delicious.
I encouraged her to eat the cake in front of her, and was getting irritated by our behavior. After a while of silence, she leaned forward.
Come on, money, money. Money?
I asked back loudly, pretending to be surprised. And frowned. Obviously. Anne sighed. As if it's a big deal to give up my precious daughter. That sort of compensation. At that point.
No.
I interrupted.
I am a woman too. I understand how precious a child is to a mother. I have no intention of taking Lucy away from Anne.
And was dumbfounded, and Lucy, surprised, dropped her fork and looked up at me. I picked up the fork that had fallen on the table and handed it back to Lucy. Was she feeling betrayed? Though it pained my heart to think so, I decided to trust Lucy, who had nodded her trust in me.
What are you saying? Therefore, if Anne and Lucy wish, I will return Lucy to Anne. I'll also help persuade Mike.
Anne, as if in disbelief.
Wait a minute.
Laughed. She looked at Lucy anxiously.
Lucy, what about you? You don't want to be separated from Kate and Dad, right?
She said, almost assuming. Lucy looked at Anne, then at me, before looking down. Then she raised her head. Either is fine. And started looking at her mobile phone screen again.
Are you stupid?
And slammed the table. Lucy looked up.
Then I'll take child support. $10,000. No, that's not enough. First, give me $50,000.
And was desperate. Gradually losing composure, her true nature was showing. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms leisurely.
That's not for Anne to decide, right? There's a set method for calculating that. Whether to pay more than that is something Mike should discuss. It's not for me to pay,
I stated clearly. Anne, who had thought she could easily get money, was getting increasingly frustrated. But I faced her squarely without changing my expression. This is just the beginning. I'll press on from here. So that you never appear before Lucy again. You told Lucy, right? As you wish.
Yes. You haven't done it at all. His father is the president of a company, right? Money should be no object.
As Anne's voice grew louder.
People are watching.
I whispered, glancing around, and clamped her mouth shut. I dramatically sighed before speaking.
What are you saying? I confirmed it with you first, didn't I? You said you wanted to take Lucy back, that you wanted to raise her yourself. So, I offered my support. Is there something wrong with that? Something wrong, you say?
Anne's lips quivered. I pressed on further.
Also, I have a question. How do you plan to support Lucy? Child support is meant to cover the necessary expenses for Lucy's life, right? It's not meant to be spent on your luxuries. You are the one supposed to cover the basic living expenses.
That's what I said.
That's ridiculous. That man ran off with a younger woman, leaving me behind. Lucy, if it comes to this, you're coming with me. If you don't want to suffer, cry with me and beg this woman. Ask her to pay money to Mom.
Her desperation was unseemly. Living selfishly, always depending on someone else without trying to make an effort. And to think she claims to have been betrayed in the end, it was her own fault.
So, let me get this straight. You have no intention of raising Lucy, but you said you wanted to take her back because you want money?
Anne didn't answer. Just glared at me.
I'll keep harassing you until I get the money. I'll even go to Lucy's school. I'll claim that despite being her mother, I was robbed of her. I'll scream in front of your house and make sure the neighbors see your shame.
And growled in a low voice, no longer caring about appearances.
Enough is enough.
I reached for the bag in front of Lucy and pulled out a small voice recorder. I turned it off and showed it to Anne.
That's a clear threat. And with this, no one will think to give you custody, income aside.
And, frustrated, stood up and reached out to snatch the voice recorder from me. I pulled the recorder away to prevent it from being taken. A hand reached out from the side and grabbed Anne's wrist. Both Anne and I looked in that direction.
Dad!
Lucy's voice echoed in the cafe.
Mike? What are you doing here?
And was astonished. I too wanted to know why Mike was here. Mike returned Anne's call with a cold look.
If you try to harm my wife, I'll sue you.
It was the first time I saw Mike speak so sternly.
Dad!
He gently stroked Lucy's head as she hugged him.
Mike, the business trip?
Wondering how he could be here when he was supposed to be overseas.
How could I not come back for a family emergency?
He smiled. Then he turned his gaze back to Anne.
When will you realize? As a mother, you're no longer accepted by your daughter. Your behavior is despicable.
Despite the anger in his voice, Mike spoke calmly. But even this must have been a severe blow to Anne. It might have been more effective than any of my arguments. And looked down for a while, trembling with frustration.
At least,
she muttered something low, reaching out and pulled the paper bag toward herself.
Then at least give me this.
Anne clutched the bag.
Sure.
I easily agreed.
I was planning to sell it to a second-hand bookstore anyway, so if you'd like, please take it.
At my words,
Eh?
And let out. Upon checking the contents,
I don't want these dirty books.
Her reaction was exactly as I had anticipated. I secretly sighed, thinking there was no saving her.
Ah,
Lucy rushed to pick up a book that had fallen to the floor, dusting each one off. Poor thing. She put them back in the bag. I stood up and squatted next to Lucy.
the books are happy to be treated with care. These were given to me by Grandpa.
From Grandpa?
Grandpa's not around anymore, but I thought he'd forgive me if I had to give them away today. But since Anne doesn't want them, would you like them, Lucy?
Lucy looked up.
Yes. I'll treasure them.
And smiled happily.
That's good. They are all first editions, some worth more than $10,000 each.
The one most startled by my words was Anne.
Eh? Really? I'll take those books then. You said you'd give them to me, right?
As Anne stood up, Mike sighed. He grabbed her shoulder and made her sit again.
You never learn. These are now Lucy's. Mike, please. Convince Kate. I really have no money. I don't care. But I'll pay for what we had here.
Mike took the check and my bag.
Let's go,
he said to us. Then, turning back to Anne.
I'll say this one more time. If you harass my wife or daughter again, I will indeed sue you.
We apologized to the cafe staff for the disturbance and left. Mike had managed to return from his trip by pushing through the arrangements. The mobile phone Lucy had been fiddling with was used to stay in touch with Mike since then, and has not shown her face to Lucy or me. However, she did visit Mike once after he returned from his business trip. She was evicted from her apartment because she couldn't pay the rent. She showed up in dirty clothes with 2 bags, begging for help with only $100 to her name. When Mike refused and told her to live more responsibly, she cursed him out before breaking down and crying like a child. Since that day, Lucy and I have been like real mother and daughter. She helps with preparing dinner and even with the laundry. It's not that she feels she has to help, but rather she enjoys spending time with me. And most importantly, we talk a lot more. Before you married Dad, you came to visit me when I was sick, remember?
Yes. I had heard about Lucy, but that was the first time we actually met.
Mom was really worried about me that day, so kind. I thought it would be nice if she could be my mom.
So why didn't you warm up to me sooner?
I asked, and it seems she was afraid that it would be harder to part if she got taken back by Anne.
You didn't have to worry about that. I'm your mom, and I'll always protect you.
I promised.
From now on, feel free to talk to me and rely on me for anything. Yes.
My daughter's cheerful response filled me with joy.